Hi everyone, Jessie here. Today we're going to talk about IBS and food intolerance. And today one of my previous clients will be joining us and she's already here. Awesome. Let me see if I can invite her. And if you chats, we will answer them later. And actually Stacy, my former client, she works in healthcare as well. Okay.
I can see you. Yay, it's working. Okay.
Let me put it in the chat and food intolerance.
Okay.
Drop us any questions here.
I see my brother just joined.
Hi, Stacy's brother. It's so awesome, right? Sharing all the intimate details with family members.
He's about to hear them all.
Okay, all right. Well, let's get started if you don't mind. Well, Stacy herself is a healthcare, works in healthcare as well. And I think I'm gonna let you share more about your story, what happened, and what led you to us, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I'll start. It's sort of a long story and a long background to get to where I was when I joined, or when I started working with you a year ago. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly when I started having so my symptoms started with diarrhea and urgency, and it's hard to pinpoint like exactly at what age in my life those symptoms started. I feel like it was probably somewhere around the age of like 18, 19, 20s. So like late teens, early 20s. And then, and I've always been like a relatively healthy person. Like I've always eaten relatively balanced and like a lot of fiber. So it was always like, oh, like what am I doing wrong? Like how can I be eating these healthy foods, but I'm having these horrible symptoms? And so honestly, I had just lived with it like my entire life. And my mom and my aunt both have Crohn's disease. So I just always like chalked it up to like, I probably just have Crohn's and this is how it's always going to be. And there's really no way to make these symptoms go away or fix it. So I just sort of was like, whatever, I'm just going to deal with it. And then about a year and a half ago, I guess it started getting like really, really bad. Like the urgency and the diarrhea started getting really bad about like a year and a half, 2 years ago. And about a month or two before I started working with you, it got to the point where it was like so debilitating that I would spend my days off work laying in bed the entire day. And then it would literally just be like running to the bathroom and then back to bed to lay down because I was so exhausted because I wasn't absorbing any of the nutrients from my food. It was literally like I would eat something and then I would be in the bathroom like minutes later and then like laying down. And so there was the week that I was like, all right, I need to go to the doctor. Like there is something wrong with me. That week I had actually lost 3 pounds in that week because I could not hold any of my food down. And so I made an appointment with my family doctor and she was suspicious that I had IBS, but she also wanted me to get checked for Crohn's disease since my mom had that, or my mom and my aunt both have it. And so, like runs in the family. And so at that point, she had referred me to a GI to do that extensive, like the workup for whatever was going on with me. And then she was like, in the meantime, while you're waiting to get in with your GI, I want you to follow the low FODMAP diet. And then she basically printed out a little instruction manual and handed it to me and sent me on my way. And I was familiar with FODMAPs. Like I had maybe suspected that I had IBS. I was like, well, maybe I do have a sensitivity to a FODMAP, but like navigating how to actually follow a low FODMAP diet was very daunting because so many plant foods have FODMAPs in them, and like being able to like create meals and like structure meals around these FODMAPs, it was just like, how am I going to do this? And so I literally went on Instagram and I searched the words in Instagram, IBS dietitian, and, you know, tons of accounts came up, and I literally went through like all the different accounts that I found and looking essentially for the most reputable one, like ones that provided like really good, you know, evidence-based information. And that's how I came across your page. And then I signed up for your dietitian, your one-on-one dietitian or group coaching. And yeah, that's how we got together and I figured out my problem.
Well, thank you for trusting me. And there are
Yeah.
a lot of accounts out there, and not everybody follows evidence. So,
Yeah.
for everybody that's listening, here are a few red flags that when you hear it, you should run. Okay, if they call themselves functional, if they say they talk about parasites, they talk about candida, they talk about GI mapping, these are all red flags because those are not evidence-based approach. And a lot of the times we hear this again and again from clients too, is they go through so many different providers and they give themselves so many different diagnoses, like, oh, you have candida overgrowth, you have leaky guts. Now these are all fake diagnoses, and you have whatever, like your GI gut microbiome is different, you need to take all these supplements. These are all red flags. You should run when you hear any of those words. And thank you for trusting me, and I'm really glad you joined us. And of course, with your case, I will let you share what we did initially, because I think we got to it pretty quickly.
Yeah, of course. So, you know, Jessie had, one of the things that she had asked me, like, what are all the different things that you have tried, like, up until this point to help with your symptoms? And honestly, I hadn't really done much because I was like, I'm eating healthy. Like, I just was like, this is just how I am. And so the one thing that I had done, though, was I was taking a probiotic that I forget what the company is now, but it is not a probiotic that it has like any evidence to like the strains that are in it. And I remember I showed Jessie the brand and she was like, stop taking that immediately. And so I was just like, oh, like, and honestly, at that point, I had no idea that it was bad to take probiotics without having an actual reason to take them. And so Jessie, when we had our very first one-on-one session, just to kind of figure out what was going on with me and to get like my medical history, I think some of the things that stood out to her were, when I was 18 or 19, I had been diagnosed with hyperthyroid or Graves' disease. And then in December of 2021, my Graves' disease had gone away, which is hyperthyroid, and then I ended up converting to hypothyroid in December of 2021. And I was diagnosed with that in December of 2021. And then she wanted like a comprehensive list of all of the laboratory values that I've had over time. And one of the things that had stood out to her was, so I actually got deferred for donating blood back in 2014 for having a critically low ferritin level. And I never did anything about it. I just got deferred and I was like, whatever, my ferritin's low. I didn't really know what to do about that, or I didn't really do anything about it. And so I think to her that like really stood out, and it was like, she's got absorption issues. And then when I told her about my lifestyle, because I think a lot of times with at least IBS specifically, a lot of the triggers can be like due to like lifestyle related behaviors, so like poor sleep, poor diet, stress, and I did not fit that category at all. Like I routinely worked out, I ate a very balanced diet, I'm not a stressed person. And so I think like when I had told her all that information, I remember I like walked out after our one-on-one. I was like, oh my God, I was like so defeated. She's like, Stacy, you do not have IBS. I think you have a gluten intolerance. And I was just like, everything in my world, I was like, oh my God, like all these things that I love, like coming to an end. And so, so that was sort of like the beginning of how we started working towards actually identifying how we came to find out that I had a gluten intolerance.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
do you want me to go into that, like how, like the process that we did?
Yes, we can talk about that. But for everybody
Okay.
listening here, most people with IBS do not have gluten intolerance. So don't just go out and cut out gluten. It's not as easy as it sounds. I will have Stacy share a little bit more later. But one of the things what Stacy was saying is we review your medical tests from before to see if anything has any red flags or correlation. And what Stacy was mentioning is ferritin. Ferritin is iron status. Now, it's normal for women to have low iron status, but it is important for us to assess everything else that is happening, causing you to have low iron status. So you're not eating enough because you're a vegetarian, that you're not absorbing even though you're eating enough, or is there something else going on like IBD or celiac? These are the conditions where it can cause low ferritin status. And we look at quite a few different labs, right? Ferritin is one, vitamin D is another one, B12 and folate. Now, I am a dietitian. I don't order any of these labs. If you work with a dietitian that orders these labs, it's probably a red flag. Usually your doctor has to order them. The legitimate labs has to go through your physician. So we make a list of recommendations for our clients to go to their doctor to get these labs done. And for Stacy's case, because you were, I think right after our first one-on-one meeting, that's when you went to your GI. And we already gave you a list of things to talk to your GI about after reviewing your previous test. Mm-hmm. And this is something I want to say to everybody listening here, right? You don't have a lot of time when you go to a GI doctor. You have to be very specific on what to share in that 15 minutes you have with your GI doctor. And one of the big reasons why we find that 90%, well, this is per research, 90% of IBS patients are very upset with their gastroenterologist or with their provider because they don't get the appropriate care or treatment plan from their providers. And one of the big reasons why is you only have 15 minutes, and this is not the doctor's fault. This is insurance companies or the way we structure our healthcare in the US. It's not the doctor's fault, but what you need to do is really utilize that 15 minutes and deliver all the information that is necessary to your GI doctors appropriately so that they can help you get the tests you need or recommend appropriate treatment plans. And that's something we do for all of our clients too. And Stacy, yeah, sorry I cut you.
No, it's okay.
I want to elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was actually, I guess I can say I do have the luxury because I do work in the medical field. So yeah. I know medical terminology. I know the right things to say to doctors. And so when you gave me the list of labs to order, I just sent a message to my doctor in my chart and I said, my dietitian is suspicious that I have a gluten intolerance. She would like you to order all of these, she would like all of these labs values evaluated. Yeah. And so, she ordered them and I was glad she did. Yeah. It was interesting. The only one of my lab values that was abnormal was the ferritin. It was just low, but my B12 and folate were normal. I can't remember. I don't remember if I got a vitamin D done or not. I don't remember.
But you know how to look at the values the next time you get it done. So yeah.
Exactly. So.
Yes. Okay. And then you went to your doctor. Do you remember your doctor appointment?
For the GI?
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually the timeline, I had actually been working with you and we had actually identified my gluten intolerance prior to my appointment with the GI. Right, yeah. Because I had to wait. I had because it was my first time ever seeing a GI. And since I was a new patient, I had like a 6 or 8 week waiting period or something. I don't think it was that long. Maybe it was like 2 to 3 weeks before I was able to get in with them. And so I had at that point had already had like 3 sessions or 4 sessions with you. And since I had cut out gluten immediately after that very, very, very first time that we met, I was sort of able to get on like the right trajectory to get me to identify what was causing my symptoms sooner. But with my GI doctors, and I can't speak to all GI offices, but with it being a specialist and because it was my first time seeing the GI doctor, they actually do 1 hour appointments for the doctor's office that I go to. I mean, obviously I cannot speak to other ones, but that the very, very first appointment that you have with a new GI it was an hour long. And so the good news is like I was able to go in there, and I knew at that point that I had the gluten intolerance. You equipped me with the non-celiac gluten sensitivity research paper in case, because you were concerned, because not all GI doctors are aware of non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And so the good news is that at my doctor's office, they said that they see it all the time and they actually diagnose it, regularly enough, like they're aware of it. And so, because that is definitely something that I remember when I was working with you, and like our group sessions that we'd had, is that some of the girls in those groups, doctors didn't acknowledge it as a disease. And it's sad because I'm like, it's changed my life. Like this diagnosis has changed my life and made me better, even though there's no like lab test to say like, yes, you have this, or
Right.
And so,
and for everybody else listening, the only way to get a diagnosis for non-celiac wheat sensitivity or non-celiac gluten sensitivity is via an elimination diet. If anybody's suggesting doing a food sensitivity test, run. It's not valid. The only way is elimination, reintroduction, monitor for symptoms. So
yeah.
And
so
that's
I can
basically,
I was going to say, I can talk about like the process that I went through to do the elimination diet and sort of how that worked, because I was just like, I was honestly like shocked by it, and how like honestly how quickly my body responded to it.
No,
And
before
so,
you go into
yeah.
the detail, I want to say to everybody again now, some people with IBS may have gluten intolerance. Most people don't have it. So please don't automatically cut out gluten. Going gluten-free is extremely, extremely challenging. Most people with IBS don't have a FODMAP intolerance. So we can talk about that later. I'll let Stacy talk about the process that we did together.
Yep. So that day after the first call that I had with Jessie, when she was highly suspicious that it wasn't IBS, but a gluten intolerance, she actually told me to cut out gluten and oats. And I think, and I must have said something to you in that call, and because it was something that I had always noticed, and for some reason I never put the two and two together, and maybe it was just because I didn't know really anything about food intolerances at the time. But I feel like I may have said to you like, oh, every single time I eat oatmeal, I run to the bathroom immediately after. Because I mean, that was literally what happened. It was like, I would eat oatmeal and then I'd be in the bathroom and I'm like, this is such a healthy food. How am I like, why can't I eat it? So anyway, Jessie had me, I completely eliminated all gluten-containing foods and oats. And during that elimination time, the goal was to get me to a baseline of normal solid stool. So like it would, going from diarrhea, urgency, runny stool to having like a formed stool. And so I would say, I think I got to that point after like a week of being oat and gluten free. And so Jessie requires us to take pictures of our poop. And so every single time I went to the bathroom, I had to take a picture of it, upload it to the app that she uses for her dietitian services. And she would review them like the next week when we would have our call. And she would go through them and look at the progression of your stool to see if it was improving or not, because that's how she's able to determine if the changes that you've made in your diet are actually making a difference in your gut. And so my stool got to a point where it was normal, I was like, my gosh, this is how it can be. And so then that's when I had to do the reintroduction to see if it would put me back to the stool and symptoms that I was having prior to eliminating the gluten. And so I remember the first day came, and it was in the morning before work that I was allowed to eat a half a slice of sourdough bread. And I was so excited because I was like, oh my gosh, I get to eat a piece of bread again. And literally within minutes of eating the piece of bread, I had severe stomach cramping, and all day at work, I had diarrhea. And I remember I sent Jessie a picture and I said, do I have to finish the reintroduction of gluten if this is already what my stool looks like? Because when you do the reintroduction, it's like a half a slice of sourdough on the first day, a full slice on the second day, and then a slice and a half on the third day. And so it was like, even after that half slice, it was like, it was evident that gluten was my problem. And so we did that with the gluten, or with the bread. And so once after then I removed the gluten and the oats entirely again, got me back to baseline. And then we reintroduced the oats, and the oats are a little bit of a interesting story. I will say the oats that I did do my, did the reintroduction with were steel cut oats. And it was weird because I could tell, like, internally something wasn't right. Like, I felt weird, but I never had loose stool. But I remember I felt extremely tired and exhausted. And I could feel it in my stomach that something was not right. But I didn't have diarrhea after doing that reintroduction. So I had always, like, questioned if I was truly intolerant to oats. But then I did my own reintroduction a couple of months ago, and it was very obvious that I do have an oat intolerance as well. But yeah, so it was, when I always thought about, like, food intolerances, I never thought about GI issues. I always thought of it as like a rash on your skin, or like an anaphylactic reaction like you do with, like, shellfish, or like a peanut allergy. And so I guess that's why I never thought that it was a food intolerance that was causing all of my GI issues that I was having.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. And again, I want to say to everybody here, please don't go and automatically cut out these things, because
No.
everybody has a gluten intolerance, and being gluten-free is a lot harder than most people think. It's if you don't mind sharing, how do you feel eating gluten-free? Nowadays, you're a lot better, right?
It definitely took some adjusting. And so I guess let me backtrack really quick. So in that time, Jessie, I also got tested for the celiac disease markers, and they were insignificant. I tested negative for celiac disease. And so that's how Jessie was able to identify that I had non-celiac gluten/wheat sensitivity. Mm-hmm. And so I part of the problem with this, and I can't speak for people who have true celiac. So I am not tolerant to all gluten-free bread. So, like, I cannot eat the Udi's bread. And so there's still a lot of research out about this disease, which is, probably why some doctors' offices don't recognize it as a true disease. There's not like a biomarker that you can pinpoint to say, yes, you have this. But so for me, that was a struggle. So it was like, I'm not tolerant to all gluten-free breads. Like, I can't just go to the store and buy any gluten-free bread. I have to buy very specific brands. So Jessie recommended Char. It's honestly the only one that I eat. And I've tried a couple other brands. And then the other thing that I have to be really careful of too, because I have an oat intolerance, is that just because something says it's gluten-free doesn't mean that it doesn't have oats. So I have to read the label on every single thing that I buy if it says gluten-free, because it could have oats, because a lot of times oat flour or oats will be utilized in place of wheat flour. And so in the beginning, I mean, I know a lot about food. You know, I love nutrition. It's something that I've always liked. So I know a lot about like food ingredients and how to read food labels. So that wasn't the difficult part. I think for me, the most difficult part was finding alternatives to the foods that I loved to eat. And so cooking is my hobby. I love it. And so honestly, what I've done is I have just found ways, like all my favorite recipes that I would make, I have just found ways to make the gluten-free version of them. And then, and and Jessie and I have talked about this before too, is that being gluten-free has sort of become like a fad diet over the years, but it's kind of a blessing because there's a lot more companies who make gluten-free products. So it gives me sort of a more expansive, like more options to choose from for cooking foods. And like, there's so many like pastas and just so many options now, are like even gluten-free pizzas at the grocery store, and like they're good. Like, but you know, maybe my taste buds have settled, and maybe I just think it's good and other people want it.
Well, I think they've definitely gotten better over the years because there's
Yeah.
so much more that goes into the food research or food science side of things too. Yeah. How are you now? Are you okay sharing a little bit more what after working together, after identifying your food triggers, how are you now? Can you, yeah, I'll let you
Yeah,
elaborate.
sure. So, like I said earlier, when we first started, when I first started with Jessie, or like prior to working with Jessie, like I was at a point where I was spending my off days laying in bed. Like I had zero energy because everything that I ate was basically going in one end and out the other, because I was not absorbing any nutrients at all, and I had lost weight because of it. Like I could not keep any food inside of me. So I was like miserable. I had absolutely no energy. And so now it's been, let's see, I think we started working together in like March of 2023, I believe, like either March or April. So it's been about a year since I've been following, since I've had my diagnosis and I eat gluten and oat free. And it is amazing. I feel the healthiest I've ever been in my entire life. Like my energy levels are, I'm like, oh, this is what it's like. This is what normal feels like. Because I think for so long it was just like, I don't know, am I just tired because I'm getting older? Like it doesn't make any sense. Like I'm sleeping 8 to 9 hours a night. Why am I so tired? And I just thought it was just like a part of getting older, but that is just, that's not the truth. I wasn't absorbing nutrients. Like I didn't have enough nutrients in me to give me energy. And so yeah, so now I'm like, I feel great, and I'm the oldest I've ever been, obviously, but I'm the healthiest. I feel the healthiest I've ever been. And one of the things that Jessie and I had discussed before we came on this live is I actually had a physical at the beginning of January, and I asked the doctor to order a ferritin on me because I wanted to know if my ferritin had increased, because I'm like, I don't have absorption issues anymore. So I just wanted to like see if it was like true, like did my lab value, did my ferritin increase? And so my ferritin levels when Jessie and I started were, I believe, like 20 or 22. And back in January when I got it tested, it was at a 36. And so I was really happy to see that they had increased. And it was like a testament to my energy levels. I'm like, this is truly like what, I mean, it's making me feel better. It's, yeah.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing that. It's a sign that your body is actually absorbing the nutrients
Yeah.
that you're eating, and it's a process, right? Especially increasing iron status in our body, it takes time. It
Mhm.
usually takes a few months of supplementation for it to have a significant increase, but it does take time for our gut to heal, and then we start absorbing the food. And for everybody just joining now, I know a few people just joined. Please don't go cut out gluten and oats because you heard someone else has, because IBS is very, very personalized. Some people have gluten intolerance, some people have FODMAP intolerance. And what we need to do is really identify what you are intolerant to so that you can create a long-term plan moving forward. We have some questions. Okay. Well, actually, for everybody who are watching, if you want to learn more of our approach, my approach, how to get people better, please watch our free masterclass. You can comment class in here, and then I'll DM you a link to watch our free masterclass, because identifying food intolerance is one of the steps, right? And Stacy talked about this earlier. For some people, it's a lifestyle trigger. It may not be a food trigger. It could be a lifestyle trigger. And then, so these are two, well, what are my three steps? One is identifying food triggers. Number two is improving gut function the right way. And that's not by taking supplements, but it is by really improving your hydration, your fiber status, and yada, 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 all those things. And then the third one is identifying your lifestyle trigger. Stacy takes care of her body. She did not have a lifestyle trigger, but she did have a food trigger. So for those of you who want to learn more about our approach, watch our masterclass or come work with us. You can go to our link in bio to learn more. But let's address some of the questions. Somebody asked, waking up with a flat stomach and having a stomach like I swallowed a basketball, especially after the evening meals, what can it be? It can be many things. So if you are distended or if you have a lot of bloating, there are many reasons. IBS is definitely one of them. Constipation is another one. Food intolerance can be another one as well. So it's hard to say from reading a statement or a question like this to identify what it may be. What we need to do is really dive deep into what is going on. Now, constipation is the most common reason why people have the backup bloats. That is when you're very, very bloated in the evening. You may wake up feeling fine, but as the day goes on, as you eat more and more things, you're more and more bloated and more distended. One way to identify whether it is constipation is looking at your bowel movement. Do you have complete evacuations or not? Or do you have a lot of gas throughout the day? You may have really stinky, smelly gas. That is a sign of chronic constipation or just stool being fermented in your colon. Now, you will hear people say, oh, you have smelly gas, you have SIBO or some sort of infection, parasite or infection. Those are red flags. Run away from those people, okay? But the most common reason why somebody is bloated and distended at night is chronic constipation. Now, there are people who have food intolerance that get extremely bloated, and we've seen a lot of clients where when they eat their food trigger, they bloat like they're pregnant. Their whole belly is swollen, everything is distended. In those cases, we want to, again, identify what that food is, remove it from your diet so your gut can start healing. Stacy, were you ever bloated?
No. So it's so interesting because I felt like so many of the girls who were in our group who had non-celiac gluten sensitivity had bloating, but I have never experienced bloating. For me, it was always like diarrhea, exhaustion, and then like nausea just from like having diarrhea. But like I never experienced bloat ever.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. But yeah, bloating is one of the most common symptoms that we hear about IBS. And there are many reasons why somebody bloats. It's important to identify your own reason so that we can resolve it for good. Don't try to take a supplement like probiotics because it might just send you running to the bathroom many times a day. So don't be very careful with that. There are a lot of very aggressive probiotics campaigns lately on Instagram. So if you see them, swipe away. Don't click into it. They may be very compelling. They may be like, well, we can help you do this, and that. In reality, most of them are not evidence-based and they can make your symptom worse. Okay, somebody asked, how do you identify triggers? So we've talked about this earlier. You can rewatch this, but basically it's via elimination diets. There's no test out on the market that can help you identify food triggers. The only way is eliminate, reintroduce, identify your symptoms, and identify your tolerance level to those foods. So it could be a gluten or oats intolerance, could be a FODMAP intolerance. The key is to step by step eliminate and reintroduce foods and monitor for symptoms. And what Stacy was saying earlier, one thing we do in our clinic is we monitor your bowel movements and your symptoms. Do you have more bloating? Do you have more pain or cramping? And what does your stool looks like? Most of the time when we look at the stool, we can tell like if something is changing inside, because it looks there are distinct changes, and your stool basically is the mirror of what's going on in your guts. And Stacy, you saw a lot of poop photos, right, when we were working together. Other people's poop photo too. Yeah, in our group program, we sometimes would share the pictures. We like, okay, let's walk through your week last week, especially after someone do a challenge when it comes to food, because we can see the changes in stool consistency or just stool completion, how evacuated somebody is. It's very, very interesting. And then somebody said, I've worked with 3 IBS dietitians and still had random flares. Like today, I don't get it. And I feel like this is never going to end. Do you want to say something to this? And I think this person emailed me, messaged me before too, and she works with functional dietitians, which I hate to say they are not, most likely if they call themselves functional, they're not practicing evidence-based practices that can truly help you. And if you've taken a lot of supplements that they recommended, it's probably the case. But yeah, Stacy, do you want to say something to that?
Well, I would say even like straying away from like if it's not evidence-based, but like if let's say your food trigger was not properly identified with whoever you were working with, and you keep consuming those foods, or unintentionally consuming those foods, or I mean even sometimes now, like I have unintentionally gotten glutened, and then it's like starting from scratch. It's like, oh my gosh, like when did this happen? What food did I eat that caused this symptom? And so sometimes flare-ups happen even if you've identified your trigger, because you've unintentionally consumed something that you didn't realize contained this food that you're intolerant to. So
yeah, and this Jackie, this she commented yes to all that. Yeah, she did work with functional practitioner, and she took a lot of supplements recommended by those practitioners. Please, these are red flags if they are recommending a ton of supplements, especially like digestive enzyme or digestive aid. I don't know. I don't do any of those, and I get questions a lot about, oh, does this work? Does that work? I'm like, no, they're not on the evidence. They're not something you should probably try. And identifying your own food trigger is the most important thing. Supplements sometimes can help with symptoms, but they are really a bandage at best. If you have a food intolerance, you need to identify it. Okay. Let's see. We have some questions that came in from IG stories, and this one, maybe you can help me answer it. I have morning loose stool. Does it IBSD morning stool? Is much annoying. I don't quite understand the full questions, but but maybe is I have loose stool in the morning. Is this IBSD? Is so annoying. It's probably, it can be. Now, IBSD comes in a variety of forms. There are some people who have flare-up diarrheas where they're constipated for days, and then they have a flare-up and they call it IBSD. And then there are overflow diarrhea. So sometimes doctors diagnose people with IBSD when a person have overflow diarrhea. Now, this is caused by the backup bloats and also fecal compaction, fecal impaction, which I talked a lot about in our webinar. So you can comment class to watch our masterclass to learn more about different types of IBSD. Now, when people with food intolerance, though, there are also different types of diarrhea that we see a lot in our clinic. Like, for example, what Stacy had was having diarrhea all day long. But then there are some people where they just have loose stools in the morning. They have maybe 5 to 6 loose stools in the morning and they're done for the day. But the process repeats again and again and again every day. It makes their life really inconvenient. They can't plan for stuff to do, or they may be, late or late for work, or just not performing at work because they have to run to the bathroom so many times. So there are different types of diarrhea, even among food intolerance. Now, gluten intolerance diarrhea is a little bit different than FODMAP intolerance diarrhea. And And everybody is also, again, a bit different. Some people react to the food right away. Some people wait. Some people have a reaction maybe a week after they do the reintroduction. So everyone is different, and it's important to work with a provider that understands all of the nuances and help you identify your food trigger. And if somebody just tried to recommend a ton of supplement, it's not evidence-based, and supplements really is not necessary unless you have a nutrient deficiency. Then that's when we may recommend a few things. But most people don't have a true food intolerance like we talk about here. The low FODMAP diet is different than a gluten-free or oats-free diet. Okay, let's see, there are a few more. I can't see the live broadcast. Oh, sorry. Oh, do you think rifaximin and neomycin combination good for SIBO? So this was a question I thought, this is so interesting. So in the master class, I did talk a little bit about SIBO. With SIBO is small intestine bacteria overgrowth. So SIBO is a condition where the good bacteria in your colon migrates to the small intestine. And when it's in the small intestine, it causes a lot of symptoms. It causes upper GI bloating, causes belching, causes reflux, and symptoms tend to happen after you eat, and then you're very, very bloated for maybe 2 to 3 hours after eating, and then the bloating subsides. And whenever you eat again, the bloating will come back. Now, SIBO is a tricky condition to treat because what you need to do is identify the root cause to why your colonic bacteria migrated to the small intestine. A lot of the times what we see doctors will do is they will treat it with antibiotics, but they don't necessarily investigate the root cause to why it's happening. Then SIBO recurrence rates is very high, and that's when people get SIBO again and again and again, and they are on antibiotics multiple times. We talked a lot about that in the masterclass, so you can watch the masterclass, but rifaximin and neomycin is a researched treatment for intestinal methanogen overgrowth, one type of SIBO, and it's the methanogen overgrowth type of SIBO. So it's not the hydrogen or the hydrogen sulfide type of SIBO. Now, if you have SIBO, really work with a provider to help you investigate. Actually, a lot of the clients have SIBO as well, and more often than not, they've been on multiple rounds of antibiotics. They've not gotten to the root cause, and we really work together to identify what the root cause is, so that you don't have to get SIBO again and again. And SIBO is just devastating. It's just such a challenging condition, and people are so uncomfortable when they have SIBO. So yeah, I think this kind of concludes our, I'll call one last question. Can you help me? I don't know anything about FODMAP. Yes, absolutely. We, when you work with us, we'll guide you through the FODMAP protocol step by step. In fact, we have a course for all of our clients. Now, the low FODMAP diet, it takes a dietitian 35 hours to learn the low FODMAP diet. And if you work with a dietitian and you just see them for an hour, it's hard for us to teach you everything you need to know about the diet. And the way we do in our practice is we have a course for all of our clients, and you can watch the modules about low FODMAP diets and how to implement it properly. And you can watch it as many times as you need to, and we also have a lot of resources. And then whenever we meet in group meetings or one-on-one meetings, you can ask us questions, and we can help you see if you are doing the low FODMAP diet properly. Now, with the low FODMAP diet, again, it has a lot of nuances. It's not as straightforward as let's just cut out this food and reintroduce them. You do have to implement it properly for you to have the effects of the low FODMAP diet. And it really does help 70 to 80% of IBS patients. So if you've been recommended the low FODMAP diet, I would recommend for you to come work with us in our small group program so that you get support from us for 14 sessions, and we will walk you through everything step by step. All right, I think that's all. Yeah, if you want to learn more about our approach, watch our masterclass. You can comment class here to get the link in your DM to watch it. If you can't do that, if it doesn't work, go to my link in bio, it's up there. And I want to thank Stacy here for joining me today and sharing your story. It's so important for people to hear more about what are the evidence-based ways to how to find a practitioner that follows the evidence and not just try to prescribe random tests or random supplements that we hear so often. And I actually, one of our new clients, that's what happened to her, and she spent thousands of dollars on supplements. And I every time I hear that, I just want to cry, because it's horrible practice. These practitioners are preying on vulnerable people who are desperate for help, and then all they do is they are not practicing the right thing, and they're recommending things, and people are spending a lot of money and causing people to also have a lot of food fear as well, when they're not really addressing what is going on, but just try to sell supplements and tests that don't really work. So yeah. Stacey, do you have any closing remarks that you want to say to everybody who are struggling?
Yeah, I mean, I always thought, like, prior to working with Jessie, that how I was feeling prior to working with her was just how my life was. And, you know, I'm so grateful that I know that the job of a dietitian exists, and I'm just so thankful that I found her, because she's such an expert, and all the girls who work with her are just such experts in the field. And, you know, if you do have GI issues, it's just really, really important that you take the proper avenues to get a diagnosis. Like, don't just listen to what you hear on social media. It is important to go to your provider. And if you think you do have IBS and your provider doesn't say anything about a dietitian, ask them to refer you to one, because, you know, like I said, like, I have the luxury, like, I know what a dietitian is, I know what your job is. And so I knew to, like, go to one myself, but I can't say that had I not done that, I don't know if my doctor would have ever recommended me going to a dietitian. So, you know, I really, really highly encourage that, especially because a lot of the time with IBS, like, it is a food trigger. And instead of, you know, taking a medication or something to put a Band-Aid on it, you could just possibly identify your trigger and not have to worry about, like, taking a supplement or a medication to manage your symptoms. You can just, an onion bothers me, I'm just not going to eat an onion. Or
yeah, eat the amount that you can
wonderful.
tolerate.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a team of dietitians actually, and it's really, really helpful for us to walk people through every step of the way, because these elimination diets are not benign. And what we also see, I want to just caution everyone to try it yourself, is that it can cause more problem down the road. When you try it yourself, you don't find symptom relief, and you become more and more afraid of food. That's the last thing we want as a dietitian. And a lot of the times, that's what we really help our clients do, is identify the trigger and then reintroduce the foods back into other foods that they can tolerate back into their life with more confidence, because we don't want you to have more food fear than you need to. The goal is always to expand your diet so that you are better and you can eat the food you love again. Okay. Thank you so much, Stacy.
Sure, you're welcome. I'm super happy to do this.
Yes, and thank you everybody who joined us today. I hope, you know, this is helpful for you. And if you need anything, send me a DM. I'm very slow to respond, but actually watch our masterclass, come in class, and to get the link to in your DM so that you can watch our webinar to learn more about what are the proper ways to treat IBS. Okay. Thank you again, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. And Stacy, thank you. Stay connected.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.